Today I'm going to talk to you about something called the sunk cost fallacy and explain why these evil investors and scalpers and flippers will not really ever go away realistically. And I wanted to talk about this topic because it's so common of a misconception and kind of like a thing that people think will happen. It's like, oh, the market's gonna crash or the bubble's gonna pop and the prices are gonna start dipping. So that means that all these evil investors and people that are just looking to flip will automatically just go away and just give up, right? But it doesn't work like that. I'm gonna explain to you why. So first, let's read the Oxford Dictionary definition of this when you Google it, right? So what is the sunk cost fallacy? It's a phenomenon whereby a person is reluctant to abandon a strategy or course of action because they have invested so heavily into it. So even when it is clear that abandonment would be more beneficial, the sunk cost fallacy creeps into a lot of these major financial decisions. And a lot of concepts and ideas that I talk about in my videos, I like to tie it into just real life and try to explain these things as simple as possible, because just because something is explained to you very complicated, it doesn't have to be. And I don't know why people do that, especially in education. So when it comes to understanding sunk cost fallacy, it's very straightforward. Examples here were visual given, like if you watch a movie, you already paid money for a movie ticket, but if the movie just sucks really bad, some people are just you're still gonna stick it out because you're like, well, I already paid for it anyways, I might as well stick it out, right? And that kind of applies to a lot of other things as well too. And it mainly ties into time spent and your money spent into it. And this is a really important concept that's so simple, but once you apply it, you'll kind of understand why. But a lot of people are blind to see it because they're so invested in these items and they're so sunk into it that they believe that, you know what, I have no other way but to just continue to invest in it rather than to back out and listen to reason and using common sense. So it comes to time and money. So time is the amount you spent, right? I keep talking about how, you know, when you come to collectibles and you're thinking about investing in it, you really need to take into consideration the amount of time, research, and just overall how much you have to give up in order to make it an actual thing to invest in these markets, especially if you don't truly enjoy it and you're purely into it just due to hype and stonks. And money. Money is the obvious one, right? No matter what you're doing in these, you know, markets and investments or whatever it is, even when it comes to collectibles and card games, you're spending money in order to buy these items. So you're invested into these regardless. So if you bought at these peak prices, for example, right? A lot of these investors bought at these peak prices because if they got in on the ground floor, then they would have flipped it. And these are the people that were grading and just flipping it and trying to hype these markets up. But if you're the one that bought into the hype and got roped into buying these graded cards, got roped into buying these sealed boxes, got roped into buying these like holy grails, then you're spent a lot of money and time, especially money, because you bought at these peak prices. So at this point, you have no choice but to commit to this, because you know what, if you back out or if you sell it at a lower price, then you're gonna feel like you sold at a loss. So a lot of these people, what they feel is that they can only go all in. And I always like to give real life examples just so these concepts are easy to tie together. And the one I'll use is pyramid schemes, right? I talked about how graded cards and White Schwartz and a lot of these like speculative cards and holy grails are all kind of like pyramid schemes because of the way these things are shilled. And you look at how pyramid schemes are, you buy at a low, pretty much a pretty high cost, like graded cards, for example. And these people don't care about the actual market demand or whatever it is. They just want to hype it up so they could pawn it off this summer, right? So it's like pyramid schemes, MLMs, or whatever it is. You can use any kind of example. And then as observers outside of these collectible markets, a lot of times you might be like, what a bunch of fucking idiots. How do people even fall for these pyramid schemes? And if they're in the pyramid scheme and they find out, then why don't these people just leave, right? And I always constantly talk about how these are like scams that prey on pretty much people that are not financially well off, are not financially educated, and people that are just very desperate. A lot of people are desperate nowadays to look for some sort of out and some kind of like way to get out of their financial situation because wages are low. People just don't have good jobs. People just feel like they have no financial future because everything's just kind of working against them. And that's just how our economy is nowadays, right? Which is why I'm so adamant about talking about these scams, talking about how you shouldn't fall for these traps and fall for these pyramid type schemes, even when it comes to collectibles. Because when you fall into these traps, like pyramid schemes, for example, these people, it's not that they don't want to get out. By the time they realize it, it's already too late, which is why I stress the importance of not buying into these things like graded white shorts cards, because a lot of these people that fall for pyramid schemes, they just have no way out because they already invested their money into it. So the only way they could pretty much get out or pretty much recover is if they're able to pawn it off to someone else, and it just continues, right? And that's how these pyramid schemes thrive. And another example, I guess, would be more pop culture and a little bit more relatable if people have ever watched the show Kitchen Nightmare or anything with Gordon Ramsay, is that what he does is he goes to these failing restaurants and pretty much he tries to help them recover and, you know, try to succeed when they're about to be on the brink of bankruptcy. And then when you watch these shows, again, right, same as pyramid schemes, you're like, how do these stupid idiots run their business so horribly and, you know, don't see it, right? And then that kind of runs parallel to a lot of these businesses that are failing out there, like mom and pop shops that can't really figure out why they fail. A lot of these restaurants, why they fail, when they pretty much is so obvious as an outsider when you look at it and go like, you know what? Maybe you're failing because your place just sucks and you don't know how to run it. Your food sucks, your quality sucks, and you just put so little effort into it. But a lot of people don't see it, right? Again, tying back to the concept of the sunk cost fallacy, you see a lot of people pretty much lose all their money in starting businesses. And then if you don't know, most small businesses actually fail within the first year. And this is pretty much because they don't know what they're getting into. And there's a lot of people, even if they don't fail within the first year, that run businesses and continue to lose money and don't know when to back out because of this some sort of like sunk cost fallacy type of mindset where they feel like, you know what, I already have so much time, money spent into it. People, you'll hear like when you work in finance and you hear people talk about money, money is such like a taboo topic. People don't like talking about it. Even if your friends in your life, they probably don't feel like talking about it, even if they're struggling financially. They rather show that they're not, because a lot of people feel like, oh, it's a shameful thing to talk about. But I feel like it's a very important thing to talk about. As an observer from the outside, it seems illogical, right? But when you look at real life examples like pyramid schemes and, you know, failing businesses, you'll realize that when most people make financial mistakes, rather than doing the logical thing to do, which would be to just reassess the situation and potentially back out, most people, what they tend to do is to double down instead and end up losing even more, or in some cases losing everything, because they feel like if I back out now and I lose everything, then I'll just be admitting to myself that I made the bad choice. But it's something that you have to get past and not have an ego when it comes to these things. You have to realize that, you know what, when you make a mistake, sometimes you just need to reassess your situation. And I always like to tell you that these concepts could be reapplied to any other aspect to your life. And you have to realize that sometimes, you know what, acknowledging your failures and accepting your failures, the most important part is learning from it so that you could prevent it in the future, because people make mistakes and it's okay to admit you make mistakes and you made a mistake, but you have to be able to learn from it. And that's how you grow as a person, and that's how you'll grow and advance and, you know, achieve success in your life, whether it's financially or anything else, right? And then when we tie all this back to card games and collectibles, you'll realize why it's almost impossible for these investors and like people that were flipping to ever really leave these markets, and probably will never leave. And despite how you think some of these graded cards are worth nothing, like again, if you're one of these people that bought some of these cards and you had no true interest in it and you're just looking to use it as an investment and to flip it, but you don't realize that you bought it at a peak price, these people pretty much have no other way out of this unless they're able to pawn it off to someone else for the same cost or more, unless they take a huge discount and a huge cut on it and end up losing a lot of their money because they already sunk the time and money in order to buy these items. So regardless of how you feel about it, no matter which side of the conversation you're on, you're for investing, you're against investing, you're for graded cards, you're against graded cards, you have to realize that these people are just part of the community regardless of how you feel about it, and they just won't go away realistically when you look about it. And you realize it because these people have time and money sunk into it, and unless they're able to sell at these certain prices because they already bought at these peak prices, which is kind of where we're at right now when it comes to a lot of these collectibles, because it's speculated and everything's just stonks to the moon. You have to be aware that as much as you dislike these people, they're probably not going to go away. So that's pretty much it. This pretty much, I hope you understand why pretty much investors will kind of never go away. And this was a little bit easier to understand. But the concept that I want to leave you off with today is don't fall into the sunk cost fallacy, no matter what aspect of your life it applies to, whether it's collecting in these games or applying it to even investments in real life, or if you're looking to start a business, or even you could apply it to when you make a mistake, like even if you're arguing with a significant other, a girlfriend, a spouse, or whatever it is. And sometimes when you say something wrong, rather than admitting you're wrong, a lot of people tend to double down on it and rather try to come out as right and just continuously argue. And they don't realize these things until it's very, very late. Realize you're not an idiot sandwich, and sometimes you need to stop and reassess the situation. Because as people, we're so fixated on being right. We're so fixated on always coming out on top because people just don't want to show weakness in any form, shape, or form. But that's the only way that we can grow as people, when we acknowledge our faults. Because unless you're willing to admit your faults, you're never able to pretty much move on and, not make the same mistakes as before. Thank you for watching, and I hope you have a great day. Take care.